All right. Well, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting on Senate Revenue and Economic Development. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Dennis. Senator Ratty. Senator Kiekeffer. Chair Neal, Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Here.
Chair Neal.
Here. All right, so we have two bills today and a work session. I will, since we are missing a member, Secretary, please mark Senator Ratty present as she comes on. We will go ahead and start with the bills and have the work session last. So first up, we will do SB 11. And I will open up the hearing for SB 11. Presenters, are you ready?
Thank you, Chairperson Neal. I believe we are. For the record, my name is Dylan Shaver. I am the Chief of Staff to the City Manager of the City of Reno. With me today is our Intergovernmental Relations Professional, Callie Wilsey, who will be assisting in the presentation. We are here today with both bills on your agenda, Madam Chair, both aimed at addressing a central issue with which you are intimately familiar, and that is, if I may speak frankly, that the method for which we finance local government in the state of Nevada is simply broken. And so as we, as a city, sit down to come to you with our bill drafts, we try and find solutions to that central challenge. And the first solution we bring you today is Senate Bill 11. Senate Bill 11, if I may share my screen here, addresses a piece of the challenge I referenced here, and that is it would allow us to take an existing eligible source of revenue, make some tweaks to it, and apply it to an acute problem of the moment, which is the growing unsheltered population in our community. Between 2019 and 2020 alone, for the point in time counts, we saw an increase of 76% in this population. The city, for its part, has been working diligently with its existing resources and with our partners in the community to find a solution for this problem, which is, of course, nothing new in the world, but we have worked to create a homelessness advisory board that brings both the county and our sister city over at the city of Sparks to the table to discuss how we approach and address this problem as a region. We understand that this is a challenge that, if we're really going to take it head on, requires all of us to be at the table putting our best ideas forward. For the city of Reno's part, we serve as the lead entity for the operation of the men's shelter, which is just now recently the men's shelter. It was the shelter in the community until last year, and we continue to operate that facility. We are also the regional lead for the Continuum of Care, which is the coordinating body between government entities and nonprofits to make sure that we're reaching out. Every region has its own. And then we have our own internal efforts to provide outreach and support for these populations. The goal for all of this, of course, is to ensure that we're sending the right solution to the right problem and not doing things like sending our police force to interact with these things when things have really gone too far. As far as collaborative efforts are concerned, the county has really done an amazing thing out in their facilities titled Our Place, which is where the homeless population that we do not interact with any longer goes. They have family facilities out there. They have facilities for women. They have facilities for youth. And that's really a fantastic site that I would encourage anybody to visit on this committee. The other, of course, we were able to take advantage of the coronavirus relief funds that came to us through the state and federal governments to establish the Nevada Cares Campus, which we are hoping to bring online this April. This one-shot funding will allow us to provide both a centralized place for the men's unsheltered population to go, but also to allow us to provide broader services that we can do in our current facility and allow us to offer things that we cannot currently offer at the shelter, like a place for couples or a place for pets, a place for RV camping, these sorts of things that we're seeing all over the city right now, but unfortunately do not have a place for people to go. The challenge with the CARES campus, of course, is that it's funded with one-shot revenues. We have to move forward and operate this in a way that makes the community proud. And to give you sort of a picture of how we handle shelter operations right now, the city is on the hook for just about 23% of those. The bulk of that funding is paid by the county. Of course, the county has a special line on the property tax to provide these levels of services, whereas the cities of Sparks and Reno do not. The net effect, though, of the city and of both of the cities chipping in what they do is that city residents end up paying about 50% more for these services than a county resident would. So a resident of the city of Reno would pay $19 a year for their share of these services versus a county resident paying just about $12. The challenge isn't so much the disparity between those entities, though. I think any of us who are residents of the city think that that's a worthwhile investment. The challenge is that we are running out of funding streams to provide these services. You know as a group better than anybody in this entire state, right, that the funds have to come from somewhere. We can either pare back what we're already doing and expand into this space, or we can seek out new forms of revenue. But when NRS 428, which gave the duty to do this sort of work to the counties, was put into place, the revenue structures that went to support that did not then go and contemplate that municipal entities would step in and fill some of the gap. And so what we are trying to do is contemplate a broader structure where we would be able to put resources to bear without our residents having to sacrifice in the form of the services that we already provide, be they police, fire, parks, sewer, what have you. We are aware these are scant times, that this is a challenging time to be having a conversation like this. We're aware that the funding sources we've identified here are earmarked for other things currently. And Callie Wilsey on my team is going to get into the bill a little bit and walk through the mechanics of what it does. But in taking sort of what we're proposing to do here, the government services tax, and allowing a city to not just enact it, but to apply it to other things, we're aware we're sort of messing with the normal authorities. But we have a responsibility when we show up in front of you to acknowledge the reality of the challenges that we face on the ground, and to come to you with solutions, whether those solutions are elegant or not. So to that end, Callie Wilsey is going to jump into the mechanics of the solution that we propose to this very challenging problem, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Appreciate laying the groundwork of how we got here and why we're here today. So just walking through the mechanics of the bill, really the main area of change is going to appear in Section 1 of SB 11. And it adds a new section to NRS 371 that will authorize cities within counties to impose a supplemental governmental services tax. And this authority is, the way it's written, is focused on counties whose population are between 100,000 and 700,000 residents. So the bill is really focused on Washoe County right now. And as we look to Section 3, the other portion of authority, this Section 3 adds an exemption to 371 under the existing county authority for vehicles that are based in a city in which the supplemental governmental services tax is enacted. Really, that goal is to ensure that the vehicle is not charged the same tax twice within the county. When we talk about the tax details, the supplemental governmental services tax carries forward the same authority that it currently exists for Washoe County, and so that would be not more than 1 cent of each $1 evaluation of the vehicle. And lastly, Section 3 also identifies how proceeds from the tax may be used. And as Mr. Shaver was talking about, really our intent here is to use these funds, as our council was discussing this BDR, about programs that provide services and support to persons who are homeless. The bill currently, as written, does carry forward language from existing NRS that talks about projects related to construction and maintenance of sidewalks, streets, avenues, and also carries forward language about operating costs to carry out governmental functions in general. We have heard this concern, and we are willing to discuss this language and narrowing of this language if that is the direction that this conversation takes us. But that is what the bill allows for right now. The remaining sections of the bill are conforming changes just to make sure that implementation is carried out in the same manner for cities as it would for counties as currently contemplated in NRS. So that just wraps up the mechanics of the bill. And, as we wrap up our presentation, we know it's very difficult to find new revenue for local governments. And we appreciate the opportunity to prevent this solution. We bring this forward. It is a revenue stream that is already authorized and contemplated. It's just not currently in use. And based on the problem we were seeing, we feel like this could be a valuable use that would help our community deal with a very critical issue. So with that, Madam Chair, we will turn it over to you for questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions on SB 11?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Ratty.
Thank you. And I apologize if this was covered a little earlier. I was unfortunately a little late, having such a challenge getting in. Just want to make sure that this is clear. So if this bill were to pass, that same revenue that could have been raised prior to this bill could still be raised. It's just rather than the county raising it for every jurisdiction, each of the individual jurisdictions would have to raise it in their own territory. So for instance, Reno could do it in the city limit of Reno, Sparks could do it in the city limit of Sparks, and Washoe County could do it in the unincorporated area of Washoe County. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, through you to the Senator, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. Members, any additional questions?
Yeah, clarification, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. So the county would still be able to allocate its portion if it chose to?
Madam Chair, through you to the Senator, yes, in unincorporated county.
Yeah, sorry, can you point me to that section of the bill? I just see the new language in Section 1 specific to the city.
Madam Chair, through you to the Senator, yes. So it's under So Section 3 maintains, it's NRS 371.043. That is where the county's existing authority is, and you'll see that the change under sub 1.c, that's where the exemption would be that essentially kind of outlines that if a city were to enact the supplemental GST, then those vehicles within the city are exempt. So essentially keeping the county's ones.
I see it, Kelly. Thank you. How many vehicles are currently registered in Reno versus Sparks versus Washoe County unincorporated?
Madam Chair, through you to the senator, I do not know the number of vehicles, but we could, I could get back to you on that. We were doing some analysis around the cost of the revenue that would bring in, though.
Is there a nexus in your mind between government services tax and your intended use of it? I mean, it looks like it's just becoming a general fund revenue stream, right? That's totally unrestricted. So, and I understand that it's, look, your options for revenue are limited. I fully understand. But homeless services have been recognized as a regional issue. And have you had discussions with the county to try to implement this? And if you have, could you say what those have been like?
Madam Chair, through you to the senator. So I think first to the nexus, I think Mr. Shaver kind of talked about this in the sense of, we're in those challenging positions to try to find solutions. And given the opportunity that this is currently authorized and contemplated, but it has not been enacted in our county for the purpose, that is why we brought it forward as a potential solution for discussion. We recognize that there are other conversations around the nexus to road construction, but we also feel like we need to discuss the critical needs in our community as well. I forgot the second half of your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if we've sort of recognized that homelessness and human services is a regional issue, that the responsibility for that primarily relies with the county, have there been efforts to get the county to impose this to fund these services, and what have those discussions looked like?
Oh, sure. Madam Chair, through you to the senator. I think regionally, we are working really hard collaboratively, and I think that those conversations are progressing, and that's what we were trying to show in our presentation early on with the Community Homeless Advisory Board, the collaborative efforts that we're trying to bring forward new solutions, all three entities together, working together to fund that. I think, the county has decided that they will oppose this bill. And I think that those conversations are ongoing and can continue to be a conversation at the local level.
The Department of Motor Vehicles submitted a fiscal note estimating revenue for the city of a little over $9 million a year, $9.2 million a year. Do you guys agree with that estimate?
Madam Chair, through you to the senator, yes, we do agree with that estimate. We spoke with them last week about it and appreciated their time to help walk us through the analysis. We would also be working with them to figure out a way to address those fiscal concerns on their end for implementation. So we are continuing conversations to figure out how to resolve that.
And then finally, Madam Chair, so would you expect to use that $9.2 million as a total supplemental addition to homelessness funding, or will this be supplanting other funding and going into other areas?
Madam Chair, through you to the senator, Our conversations with the council directed when they were bringing this forward would be to continue to support the human services needs that we are seeing right now.
So do you have a $9.2 million gap between your current expenditures and how much you need to expend to meet your obligations under your regional partnership?
So I think it's, sorry, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Keycupper. This is Dylan Shaver.
Just go direct.
I apologize. So Senator Keycupper, thank you for that important question. It's important to note the bill itself does not impose the tax straight away. Without the authority, we sort of have a sense of what our gap could be. But we would have to then take the totality of needs in this area, and the council would need to weigh what they wanted to impose to meet those needs. I think Senator, that in this community, and I hate to say it so bluntly, but the needs are basically limitless, and we would operate within the constraints of the authority granted under the bill to determine a reasonable approach to address them.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions?
Madam Chair, if I could have another shot.
Madam Chair.
Oh, if somebody else. Yeah, please let somebody else go first.
Senator Dennis.
Thank you. So I kind of want to follow up on a couple things. So you would be using this for homeless services. When the county takes over all of that for the county, are you going to give it up at that point?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Again, Dylan Shaver, City of Reno, for the record. If the county were to take over these things, and we have sort of no indication that is imminent, but should the county actually take over the entirety of that portfolio, then there are a series of revenue sources, this one included, that we would work with them to make sure they had the resources they needed to do so, if they were to do so. That said, given the current breakdown of responsibilities here, as well as the state of play in this region, we do not have reason to believe heretofore that is imminent.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Ratty, or go ahead. Oh, no.
I'm happy to allow Senator Ganser to go first.
Yeah, Senator Ganser, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in looking at the NRS you provided, 428010, it does talk about it's the duty of the county to take care of these types of health and human services, so indigent care and health and human services. And so the first thing I was wondering, when the land was purchased, the Governor's Bowl was purchased, which is now the Nevada Cares campus, was the City of Reno the only entity that could have purchased that? Did it have to go through the city versus go through the county? Because it seems like we're starting to build two campuses out now. We've got one that the city owns and potentially is operating, right? And then we've got Washoe County expanding at their campus, the new campus they have that used to be the NAMS campus of the state. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, as far as that purchase, was that limited? Were the funds limited as far as availability to the city only?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Again, Dylan Shaver, City of Reno, for the record. You raise an excellent point in that I missed something apparently in the initial presentation. That parcel and that project is done in partnership with both the county and the city of Sparks. I believe the Governor's Bowl parcel, and I'm not super familiar with the NDOT process, but that was land that we were leasing from them anyway, and I do believe that made things a little faster for us. The other parcel was a private parcel that anybody could have stepped in and purchased. We, as the largest recipient in the region of those CRF dollars, sort of took the lead on it because we viewed it as sort of a long-term investment, both for the community, but also an opportunity for us to take our facility right now, which is sort of insufficient, and supplement what the county is doing up at our place.
Okay. So my concern is that the county, through statute, is responsible, or it looks like responsible for this type of care and these types of operations. But we're kind of getting both, and it sounds like you're working together. But Senator Dennis just asked a question because I think maybe in Clark County, it's recognized that the county is providing those types of services, and so the expectation was is potentially something would get turned over to the county since through statute, via statute, there's responsible. So I guess that's kind of hanging out there. And so the services, and then the language itself of the bill is really broad. I mean, the language isn't just about homeless services. It's kind of about you can use it for any purpose. So that part of the language is concerning too. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Senator Ratty.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess first thing, I know we don't have legal counsel with us today because we have them diligently working on drafting, and I don't want to change that. But I would like to get an answer perhaps before this bill goes to a work session. So we've had a couple references that homeless services is the responsibility of the county based on the language of indigent care. And I just want to make sure, because this has been a long-standing conversation in our community, decades long at least, if that's what that really means. And so if we could get some help from our legal counsel around that, I think that might help to move some conversations forward in the region around the definition of indigent care. Is that really medical care? Is that homeless services? What does that mean? That's my first piece. And then secondly, I'm curious, Mr. Shaver, have we made progress towards, I know that there's limitless needs, no question. But I do think that there are some concrete things that we've been talking about in the region. So for example, case management ratios. So we know that we've been able to get to a place where for the women's shelter and the family shelter and the young person shelter 18 to 22 run by Eddie House, that they've been able to get to the case management ratios that we're hoping for, which are in the 1 to 25 or 1 to 15 range. I know that there's been some progress in the men's shelter, but I don't think we've been able to match that in the men's shelter. And I feel like we should probably have a dollar amount for what it would cost to get us to a better case management ratio. And then just generally, as we're building out the Governor's Bowl campus, I think we know that we're starting with a pretty basic level of services, but I think that there's a package of services that we can contemplate. So not trying to meet every need in the region, but just knowing if we could get to a reasonable level of case management and the basic package of services we want to offer at the Governor's Bowl so that CRF investment actually turns into impact in real people's lives. Do we know those numbers, or are we getting close?
We're getting very close to having more concrete figures around that. The Governor's Bowl itself has, and the completion of that project has been the primary, I would say, absorbent of staff time around here because it has been such a huge undertaking to turn around so quickly. Callie, do you have details from the Stockham memo as of yesterday that might be useful here?
No, the memo that laid out more of the phasing and the timing of the opening of that campus and the different services that would be in there, but we can work on that and share that information as soon as it's available.
I think that would be super helpful. I think to my colleagues' question about what's the nut we're trying to crack here. I think just having a number also for all the people who are contacting us about why do you need this money, would be super helpful if we could get that information. And I know that that won't be all the needs, but it will be probably the most logical place that we would start.
Okay. So I had a quick follow-up because I need to get clarity around something. So when at the beginning of the hearing, it was stated that you're going to take the penny, but the penny is still eligible for the unincorporated part of Washoe. And I think what I want to get put on the record is the unincorporated part of Washoe has the least amount of population. So what's the effect of that? Yes, a penny is available for the unincorporated part, but that is the least populated. So what does that leave Washoe with? I know they have Sparks, but what does that really leave them with if you take the whole cent?
So one of the things that brought us here today, Madam Chair, again, Dylan Shaver for the record, is that we are talking about an unexercised portion of this tax. And Callie can get into the specifics, but the county is authorized to go up to a certain amount, which they have not on this particular revenue. And we're only asking for the part that they are, for whatever reason, not using. And recently, in fact, as recently as a Board of County Commissioners meeting in January, I believe, they opted that they would continue not to collect that resource. Callie, do you have the numbers on that?
For the record, Callie Wilsey, I mean, I think in terms of, we were thinking about it in terms of proportionality. So for the city, it would represent 54%. While the county's population represents about 23.5%. So that if we looked at the full bucket of running it countywide, our assumptions, at least based on the revenue side, were around populations. But I think that this also gets to Senator Keykever's question about number of vehicles as well, which I think needs to be looked at a little bit.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I just had a quick question on Section 4 of the bill, where you're adopting, I guess, language or powers that the county has had because you're going after the supplemental GST. But I guess what I was trying to figure out in Section 4, where it says Section 4 sub 3, where now the city will be able to dispose of any residential real property purchased. Talk to me about, I guess, the real life effect of that, because county has that power. Now you would be getting that power. Are there any conflicts posed to the creation of that overlap of authority?
Madam Chair, Callie Wilsey for the record. So this section was related to when working with LCB to draft the bill. It was related to the other sections in Section 1 related to authority that already existed for counties and carrying forward that language. So it was replicated. I think that this goes to the conversation about whether this bill should be narrowed, because I think that those portions of the bill would then also likely be amended out if this bill were to focus on homelessness particularly. So I guess what I'm saying is, in consultation with LCB as we were drafting it, those portions were added just to make sure that there was consistency through NRS, not in particular driving points for the city's request.
Okay. And then my final question is, so what if you were only able to get half of a penny to meet your needs going forward?
Madam Chair, Callie Wilsey for the record. I think on this particular bill, we are open to conversations about that. As we were presenting, there's a funding need regionally for this, as well as for this, just directly in the city. So I think in addition to that, I think that additional conversations are warranted around the need based on what about the language in terms of purpose from what I've heard from several of the senators today, as well as that long-term picture of how do we manage this if responsibilities were shifted around. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we will go ahead and open up for support on SB 11.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do that.
Sorry.
Hand up. sorry. But thank you. So just my other comment would be around the uses, because this is GST and it's meant for roads. I mean, that's the nexus for the tax itself. So I guess pulling that out too is concerning. So anyway, I understand that there is a need for the homeless shelters and the homeless population, but also the direct nexus and the reason this is kind of sitting out there is for roads. And I just wanted to make a comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is more about impact, right? Because people actually pay these taxes. The city doesn't just collect them. So what's the estimate on what an additional penny would mean for the registration of a new car in the city of Reno versus outside of it?
Senator Keycover, so if, for example, a 2-year-old vehicle that had an MSRP of $20,000, this would be about $60 a year for the penny.
New cars, okay. I can extrapolate it upwards then based on value. So $60 per $20,000 of value.
Right. I mean, it contemplates the 35% and then the depreciation over the various years. So that's why I was just kind of, I used a similar example that I've seen.
Thank you for that. I've always been struck by how significant our vehicle registration fees are in this state. Everybody pays them. Sometimes people have a comma in their registration fee, and just sensitive to that. Thank you.
Chair, I did have another question too. Sorry.
All right, Senator Ratty.
So first of all, I just wanted to clarify the authorized use for the county existing is indeed pay the cost of certain projects related to construction and maintenance of sidewalks, streets, avenues, boulevards. So I think that's the road. Carry out an interlocal agreement between the county and regional transportation commission, so roads. But there's a third piece there that is pay the operating costs of the county and any other costs to carry out the governmental functions of the county. So I do just think it's important to be clear on the record that the existing authorization for the county is not limited to roads and is frankly far more broad than the language that's being brought forward by the city, because it includes the word any governmental function of the county. So that's just the first thing I think is important to have on the record. Second, I was trying to find it and I'm just not good at reading bills today, so I apologize. Does the existing authorization for the county have any expiration date? Does it ever go away?
Senator Callie Wilsey, for the record, not that I am aware of.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and open up for support on SB 11. I believe we have a councilwoman in. Is she on 70? Is she on 11 or 73?
Madam Chair, she's on 73.
Okay, never mind. All right, so BPS, go ahead and open up for support on SB 11.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in support of SB 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 534. Please state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, this is Skip Daly, D-A-L-Y for the last name. and we're just wanted to speak in support of SB 11 from a higher level than what the question you guys were asking. I understand the questions you guys were asking were all great and pertinent, but basically our position is that the revenue source is unused. The county, for whatever reason, has refused or declined or just not taken action in order to implement it and utilize it. Senator Ratty is correct on the language that's already in statute now that it can be used for other governmental services. We just think that if the county is not going to move and do this and address the needs either for the roads, which there's also always a backlog for, or for these other governmental issues, including the homelessness issue, that you should take it away from them and you should give it to the city and let somebody who's trying to do something useful for the citizens move forward. I'm hoping that this will be a catalyst for the county to take a look at it and maybe implement it, because I do think that they're better suited. It makes more sense. It's easier to administer. They have better staffing and ability to provide these services than the city does. However, they still won't take any action. So I think this body should authorize the city, because the alternative apparently from the county's point of view is to do nothing. And to me, and I think many other people, that would be unacceptable. I understand the concerns over cost and use. And if this does move forward, we would engage with the city to talk to them about, splitting the use between the intended nexus use for roads and various things and other city entities. But we wouldn't want to see it just used for anything and absorbed into the general fund and not really go to anything. And we've always supported or been in the position where if a government entity or the legislature wanted to siphon money out of other funds with no nexus and take money that's existing, or they didn't want to implement new resources or new avenues of resources, we've always resisted that and said, if you want to get your money, go get your own money. And this is an avenue to do that. So to the extent they're doing that, we want to support that. And if the county won't get off the dime, I think you should authorize the city to do something to address these issues. I appreciate you guys' time. Good seeing you. Thanks.
Thank you, Benjamin Daly. It's good to hear from you.
To testify in support of SB 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. The public line is open. Oh, excuse me. Caller with the last 3 digits, 497. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Yes, this is Yvonne Sweeten, Yvonne, Sweeten, Sweeten. I am against this bill.
So we're currently, Ms. Sweeten, we're currently on support. So just hold.
Oh, okay.
BPS, does it look like there was anybody in for support? I was getting ready to shift to opposition.
No, besides the last caller that raised their hand, no one else raised their hand in support of SB 11.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and go to opposition. Now, Ms. Sweeten, you can oppose.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yvonne, Yvonne, Sweeten, Sweeten. Thank you for letting me speak. I am against the bill and don't think it is good for our state.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
PPS, anyone else in opposition?
Yes. Thank you. If you're just joining us, please press star 9 now to voice your opposition to SB 11. Again, press star 9 now to voice your opposition to SB 11. Caller with the last three digits, 863. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 863. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 888. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Neal, members of the committee. Peter Kruger, P-E-T-E-R, Kruger, K-R-U-E-G-E-R, with the Nevada Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association. I provided written testimony, so I won't repeat that. However, I do want to emphasize the burden and cost, the cost burden to commercial operators. While I indicate in my testimony that many of the vehicles are of the petroleum nature, fuel haulers, are exempt under the provisions of this statute. There are other vehicles that, especially older vehicles, in the heating fuel, propane, and other fuel delivery categories that do not leave the county and therefore would be subject to this tax. I think it's interesting to note that a fuel vehicle is a very specialized vehicle and expensive. So that if you take a vehicle that has a value of $150,000, you can 1 cent on that. You can see that the tax would be something like $1,500 the way I compute it. The second thing I wanted to point out is that Washoe County already has the highest gasoline tax. I won't say the nation, because there'll always be somebody who can dispute that, but highest in Nevada for sure. We're at, my testimony indicated, 90 cents on gasoline, and that's federal, state, local, and indexing. Just so you know, the indexing portion alone of that 90 cents in Washoe is 37.7 cents a gallon. That increases by about 1 to 2 cents under the current rate of inflation annually. So we can look that will go increase by 1 or 2 cents on July 1st. The other question that we have is and it's not spelled out in the bill, is how this would be audited, in the sense that based on DMV records, I assume that any vehicle in the city of Reno, should this pass, would get a bill, much like I do and you do, for our automobile. And to demonstrate that vehicle, in the case of commercial, and meeting the provisions for exemption, how does the business demonstrate to the satisfaction of the DMV that this vehicle is in fact driven interstate or intra-county? We see that as a huge burden to business at a time when we need less burden and more opportunity to be productive. So, Madam Chairman, that concludes my opposition in opposition to Senate Bill 11. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. DPS, is anyone else in opposition? And I want to remind everyone that time limit is 2 minutes.
Caller with the last three digits, 116. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 116. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alexis Motorex, Alexis Motarex, with the Nevada Chapter AGC. we are in opposition to SB 11. While we understand that local government's funding structure is woefully inadequate, we do not believe that taking authority away from Washoe County to implement the supplemental GST is the appropriate way for Reno to augment their budget. The original purpose of GST was to fund infrastructure, which is something that is continually neglected at the state and local level. The supplemental GST was passed in 2009 to address significant budget shortfalls brought on by the Great Recession. But fortunately, the county was able to provide for their citizens without having to enact this tax. Per the governor's request that local governments accelerate capital projects to create jobs to help Nevada recover from the economic fallout from the pandemic, investing this money in infrastructure would do much more to help Nevadans than any other use we can think of. We ask that the original intent of the supplemental government services tax be respected and that it be left to the county's discretion to implement it for funding infrastructure needs. Furthermore, we believe that this is simply bad policy. Passage of SB 11 will set a precedent that will lay the groundwork for other local jurisdictions to seek their portion of any money allocated to their county should they think they could do a better job of providing services. We shouldn't allow that to happen. We respectfully ask that you vote no on SB 11 and appreciate your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Thank you, Chair. Caller with the last three digits, 292. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 292. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob Benner, ROBBENNER with the Northern Nevada Building Trades. We are calling in opposition of the bill, but we truly aren't in opposition. We're just looking for a couple language clarifications. I myself was a part of a coalition group that met with the county commission a couple years back on implementing this tax or this fee to address infrastructure needs, and also we were asking to split it in half, for half to go to infrastructure and half to go into low-income housing trust that the housing group was trying to put in place. That did not go through. Obviously, the county commission did not decided not to take that up. But we do see the need for infrastructure, and we also see the dire need for funding for the homeless crisis we have here in Reno. And we have been in contact with the city of Reno on this bill. And like I said, we aren't necessarily opposed to this bill. We're just looking for some clarification, and would like to support this bill moving forward. And also, I will just echo the comments that Skip Bailey made earlier in support of this. Thank you.
Okay, so that was kind of like I oppose, but not. So maybe we should put you in neutral. EPS, is anyone else signed in?
Yes, Chair, there are a few more callers for opposition.
Okay, just want to remind the speakers that if it's already been said, it's perfectly fine to say ditto. I dislike this bill, and keep it to 2 minutes.
Hello, this is Janine Hansen, the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom, JANINEHANSEN. Now is not the time to raise taxes on car registration in the city of Reno. SB 11 would result in a possible increase of $150 a year for a person with a car of only $15,000. People are suffering economic loss because of the pandemic. Many have lost their jobs. Many may lose. Many businesses have suffered severe economic loss, and others have closed. Almost everyone has had to tighten their belt. It is incredible that during this economic disaster, the city of Reno would be seeking to raise taxes. They're not considering the people that live in Reno and who are just trying to survive the economic catastrophe. In the United States, in general, according to the Institute for Policy Innovation, the total U.S. tax burden, including federal, state, and local taxes and hidden taxes, equal to 56% of annual personal consumption spending. In other words, taxes consume 56% of all the average person spends. This includes 19% in state taxes and 13% in local taxes. Then consider the hidden taxes we don't see. Businesses don't pay taxes. They pass them on to consumers in the price of goods and services. For instance, for a cheap loaf of bread that costs $1.14, taxes account for 35% of the cost. For a 50-cent can of soda, 18% goes towards taxes. There are many hidden taxes. Many people may be forced to choose between paying the car registration and paying for food or rent. Please vote no on SB 11. Don't allow the city of Reno to further harm their citizens by imposing this additional tax in this time of economic downturn. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 105. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Lynn Chapman, State Vice President of Nevada Eagle Forum, LYNNCHAPMAN. Mark Twain said, quote, "The difference between a taxman and a taxidermist is that the taxidermist leaves the skin," unquote. I have asked the same question of the legislature each and every session since the 1990s. How much is enough? How much money is enough? I have the answer to that question. There will never be enough. There is always another crisis, and everyone wrings their hands. The citizens and taxpayers all have to find a way now to pay for essentials that keep going up in price every year, but our legislature seems to think that we are a well of unending dollars, and we are not. Benjamin Tucker said, quote, "To force a man to pay for the violation of his own liberty is indeed an addition of insult to injury," unquote. You know, we already have many programs in places for the homeless in Washoe County, and we also have very high gas taxes to pay for roads and such. You know, how much more will be enough? And that's what we keep asking. Please, we don't have more. Families are hurting and trying to find ways to survive today. Please don't punish them further, and please vote no on SB 11. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 600. Please state and name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 600. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Proceed, please.
I'm so sorry. I was using my smartphone and it's not smart. My name is Patricia Stewart, Stewart, and I am calling in opposition to SB 11. I have been listening in on the conversation about this bill, and I'm disturbed by a few things that this legislature doesn't know how many vehicles this would impact, and they don't have a dollar amount. It's kind of like asking for taxes before you know what you want to spend it on. It sounds very backwards to me. If in my household, I find what I need, exactly an amount, and then I figure out how I'm going to acquire that. Either I get a second job or I make cutbacks in my budget. I heard words like unrestricted streams and a lot of ifs if the city or the county uses things. There's lots of ifs. I care about the homeless. My church gives to the Hope House and actually helped start that. And we support all of those things within our community. But more taxes right now is not a good idea. I also heard a penny for the automobile registration, and the math that I heard didn't make sense, that if I have a $20,000 car, I'm only paying $60 more. Well, that's not a penny. If I have a $12,000 car, I'm paying $120 a year extra. So I'm disturbed. The math isn't working out here, you guys, and I know you work at it really hard, but I didn't hear any definitive. So I vote no on this bill. I think everybody needs to figure out how to fix their budget before they ask for more money. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, caller. Next.
If you are just joining us, we are currently voicing opposition to SB 11. If you would like to take your place in the queue to voice opposition to SB 11, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 124. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal. For the record, Paul Moratkin, M-O-R-A-D-K-H-A-N. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with the Vegas Chamber. I am here today to express the Chamber's opposition to SB 11 based on the change of the fiscal policy of what has been proposed with the governmental service tax funds and how it would be accessed and accountable by local governments at the broader level. In the presence it was set. Our opposition is strictly to the concerns of the fiscal policy and tax policy. We urge you to vote no on this piece of legislation. Thank you for your time today, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 725. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is Andrew McKay, ANDREW, I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchise Auto Dealers Association. Briefly, we are opposed to SB 11 because it will increase the cost of a person to own and operate a vehicle. Today, one of the biggest barriers to placing an individual into a safer, more fuel-efficient, and cleaner-burning vehicle is price. Admittedly, this doesn't impact the purchase price of a vehicle. However, it does impact the operational cost, and frankly, in a significant way, as pointed out by previous callers. The legislature is working very diligently to try to expand the offerings of electric vehicles, and my dealer members are doing that. And anything that we can do to help advance that, we should push forward. We believe that these measures such as this, that increased cost can be detrimental to that goal, and therefore we are opposed to the measure. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 112. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
For the record, Bruce Parks, BRUCEPARKS. I am absolutely, adamantly opposed to this bill. I would strongly encourage you to vote no on this bill. Ditto Lynn Chapman, ditto Janine Hansen. Taxpayers have had enough. As far as the homeless situation, the city of Reno has not effectively addressed this problem for decades. I don't see how throwing more money at the problem is going to fix anything. City of Reno has the most fiscally irresponsible city council I have witnessed in my lifetime. Giving them more money is not going to fix anything. As far as spending another dime on the homeless in this community, if the city of Reno would effectively address the problem, it would go away. But they refuse to do that. If you want to solve the homeless problem, you enforce the existing laws that are on the books. and the problem will be solved. But the city of Reno refuses to acknowledge that simple truth. I applaud the Washoe County Commissioners for holding on to these funds and not giving them to a fiscally irresponsible entity. It will do no good, and as long as, for the record, as long as there is a homeless population in the city of Reno, the city council will always have an excuse to reach into the taxpayers' pockets. The city of Reno does not understand the simple economic principle of the Laffer curve. They have already forced major purchases out of the city of Reno. This measure is going to force people out of the city of Reno and Washoe County. There will be a mass exodus if we are continually taxed beyond our means, which we already are. We are taxed. Vote no, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 170. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 170. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Hello. Hi. My name is Gina St. Ors, GINAST_ORES. And I am very much opposed to SB 11. My family, who lives in California, has this same exact bill on them, and they are paying so much more money for everything that they need already in California, and now we want to follow a failing state? That makes no sense to me. And this is a tax that, if it's supposed to help the people, it should be on the ballot for the people to vote for, not just an exclusive little group. Because quite frankly, it's the people like myself that saw simple items to keep their house COVID safe during a crisis, like vinegar, go from $1 to $2.49 in the store. That's 250% markup, and that's just one item. I'm barely trying to make my budget work. I'm using scrap wood to heat my house during the day. And you guys want to impose a tax during an economic crisis? It just sounds so cruel that anybody would think that this is a very good thing for the constituents, the people, the mothers, the grandfathers, the elderly, the disabled. Nobody, the veterans, no one seems to be exempt from this. So, people that are already on super tight budgets are going to get squeezed that much more. This is very wrong, and it needs to be on the ballot, and not just for people who can only talk about everything from, I just heard bickering about where the money is going to go, and I didn't hear one person talk about the people out there paying for this. Not one of you. And I thought you guys were public servants. I'm sorry, but please, I vehemently oppose this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 166. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Barry Duncan, BARRYDUNC again. Chair Neal and members of the committee, Barry Duncan, for the record, on behalf of the Nevada Taxpayers Association. Let me just say that we are opposed to SB 11 based upon and due to similar comments raised by AGC of Northern Nevada and the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 580. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Paul Enos, E-N-O-S. I am the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, speaking today in opposition of Senate Bill 11. I do agree with Senator Ratty's assertion that this tax can be applied broadly, doesn't just have to be used for roads. It's in lieu of personal property tax. They brought in this application, voter approved in 1962. Where we do have some issues with this is while most of my members are going to be exempt for this bill in Section 1, Sub 1B, we really don't know how to prove that you have left the county. If you leave the state, that's really easy, but leaving the county, that's kind of an open question. That's something that not a lot of my folks contemplate. We do believe that this hit is going to be on those carriers who have very limited operations. We do agree with both Mr. Kruger and Mr. McKay about the increasing cost being a disincentive, and in a county where we already have the most expensive jurisdiction in the state to operate, we do think this would be a disincentive. We appreciate being able to testify, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. Next. So I just want to remind everyone who's calling in, it looks like we still have a lot more opposition. If someone has already repeated the comments, it is perfectly fine to say ditto or I dislike this bill. And we're going to limit the time. It's 2 minutes, but I might cut it because we actually have a second bill. But next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 863. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Revenue Committee. Dagny Stapleton, D-A-G-N-Y, S-T-A-P-L-E-T-O-N. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Association of Counties. We want to defer to Washoe County on their position, but also echo their position and add that it's the perspective of our members that this bill, if passed, would set a precedent that is concerning for all counties. What this bill would do, as you know, is authorize the redirection of regional county revenues to individual entities, in this case cities. And while GST is a state tax collected and then distributed to the different entities, the supplemental GST is a tax that was created for counties to provide regional services. I want to highlight some of the important regional services that counties provide: general human services, senior services, homeless services, support to our state's Medicaid program for nursing home care, and of course for regional roads as well. Cities do not have the similar mandates that the counties function under, and therefore do not have all of the same revenue streams or provide those same services. So for those reasons, redirecting a regional revenue stream to a non-regional entity, we believe is not good policy, and we oppose the bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 872. You may have 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 872. Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Nick Vanderpool, N-I-C-K-V-A-N-D-E-R-P-O-E-L, with Capital Partners, calling today on behalf of the Reno-Sparks Chamber of Commerce. Madam Chair, I picked up what you put down, so I will echo a lot of the comments of my colleagues and their opposition, and we stand with them. But I would be remiss to say we do appreciate the City of Reno taking the time to present the bill to the Reno-Sparks Chamber of Commerce Public Policy Committee, and I just want to put that on the record, so thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 799. Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yes, hello, my name is Lorraine Dougherty, D-O-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y, and I oppose this bill for 2 reasons. Number one, the people of Reno and Washoe County and all of Nevada are in a dire economic emergency, they hardly need another tax. And also on the issue of using this tax for the homeless, I think the national experience shows us, especially in other states, that putting forth funds after fund after fund after fund for the homeless is not the solution. These people want dignity. They want a life. They don't want to be housed like cattle in a tent or in a warehouse. So I don't think this is the solution, and so I oppose, and I hope that you will vote no against this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. EPS, is anyone else?
There's one more hand up for opposition, Chair. Caller with the last three digits, 229. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. I'm Jamie Rodriguez, the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County. That's spelled JamieRodriguez. I am here today in opposition of SB 11. So I just want to walk back very quickly and talk a little bit about this tax and kind of where it's come from and some of the history. As a result of the recession that happened across the country, but in this state, there were some state funding pushdowns that were sent to the counties during that recession. And through work with the legislature, there were some optional uses or expansion of uses for the supplemental GST given to the county to help offset those fiscal impacts. I also want to be very clear that over the years, these funds have been discussed for a multitude of projects, but that for one reason or another, those projects did not happen. I also want to be very clear that the county is not opposed to implementing this tax. Rather, the county seeks to use these funds in a very strategic way. So I want to clarify that that is what was stated by my Board of County Commissioners in our January meeting, that we want to make sure that we use these when it's most appropriate. We want to be clear these taxes can only be enabled and collected one time. So we want to be sure that at the point in time with which we enable this tax, that it is in fact for the greatest need and used most appropriately. Same as Reno, we appreciate the want and need for additional funds, but we are very concerned about the precedent of a city being able to take a resource away from the region, specifically the regional service provider, which is the county. There were some questions from the committee about impacts, and I want to clarify that one of those impacts, specifically to the county, is that funds raised in only raised, in unincorporated county cannot be used for regional services. As we are the regional service provider, that does limit what any funds collected by the county for a tax on unincorporated residents really could be used for. Also want to state we do have some confusion about the bill since as a region, Washoe County is actively taking steps to be the lead in the operation of homeless shelters in our region, as Washoe County is already the provider for the social services in our region. To demonstrate that, in 2020, we opened Our Place, which is mentioned in the presentation, is a women and children's shelter that was created and funded through the county. And yes, the city of Reno was the primary funder of the property for the CARES campus. However, at the end of last year in December, we agreed to a funding structure that equals out approximately 60% of the county funding the operations of that shelter, with the remaining 40% being split between the cities. So if the city is going to be collecting a tax for homeless, then we're a little unclear as to why we're taking over that financial responsibility for the region. I also want to clarify that during the presentation, there was discussion of the county getting indigent funds or having to set aside specific funds for indigent. I want to be clear that the bulk of homeless funds is general funding from the county. Much of that property tax that is collected actually goes to the state for state match requirements, because as mentioned by Dagny Stapleton from the Nevada Association of Counties, there are a multitude of regional services that counties are required to provide, and indigent is not inclusive of only homelessness. And then just want to reiterate some of the concerns that have been mentioned by other callers about ensuring that if this was going to be enacted at the city level, we want to make sure that the DMV would be able to clearly delineate who that increased tax should be assessed to, as we would not want unincorporated residents paying a city tax. And this is why a lot of these taxes are assessed at the county level currently, because those boundaries are very clear and it's very easy to determine who should get put at what tax rate. So sorry, I went kind of fast trying to get it in that 2 minutes for you, Chair, but thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. BPS, is anyone logged in for opposition?
No, Chair, there are no callers to speak in opposition at this time.
Thank you. All right, so we will move to neutral. Is anyone in neutral for SB 11?
To take your place in the queue to speak in neutral testimony for SB 11, please press star 9 now. Again, to give neutral testimony on SB 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. There are no callers to testify in neutral to SB 11 at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. So, City of Reno, do you have any closing comments on SB 11? You have brought us a wonderful non-neutral bill, and we are ready for your next presentation. So, closing remarks on SB 11.
Madam Chair, no, thank you very much. We appreciate hearing this bill and the conversation that was had today, and we look forward to continuing to work with this committee and stakeholders on this issue. So, thank you. We look forward to the next presentation.
Okay. So we will close the hearing on SB 11 and open up for SB 73, City of Reno.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. We are going to work on sharing our screen here and we'll get started. All right. Madam Chair and members of the committee, we're honored to be here for this second item and present Senate Bill 73. I am joined by my colleagues today, Jamie Schroeder, who is the City of Reno Parks and Recreation Director. And as you saw on the last call, Mr. Shaver, the Chief of Staff to the City Manager, is also here if there are questions at the end that need to be addressed as well. So where I want to start with this bill is really kind of what's behind it and what is driving it. So in 2017, the city adopted its new master plan. And as a part of that effort to update our plan, we had one of the largest, most intensive public engagement efforts the city has ever undertaken. And one of the things we did through that was really ask our residents, what is your vision for Reno? And what we heard from our residents is we want Reno to become a base for outdoor activities. That was the number one thing that came through at the end of the day. This is what they told us what their vision is for the city. And so our master plan includes a plethora of policies and implementation strategies for us to make that vision come to life. So what we're talking about here is ensuring our parks, recreational facilities, trails, and open space areas are well maintained. They're accessible across the community. They are interconnected. We really want to ensure we're meeting the demands and needs of our residents, and that we conserve and protect Reno's natural resources, which are so vital and valued in our community. When we talk about community impact, we know that there is so much that parks and recreational services provide to our community. Not only the economic value when we talk about property taxes, but why do people want to come here? And we hear a lot about the outdoor opportunities that we provide, and we need to invest into that, into our economic development strategy, dollars into our parks and recreational facilities. Additionally, we're talking about value towards healthy lifestyles, environmental benefits, and quality of life for all of our residents. As we work to make this vision a reality, we are facing several challenges and conditions that are barriers to doing this. And the three that we're going to talk about today are growth, the demand for facilities, and the impact to that on maintenance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Schroeder, who's going to talk us through a little bit more about the details of those challenges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Jamie Schroeder, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Reno. As Callie has transitioned into this, Reno does continue to grow. We've steadily grown since 1990. It's definitely a place that people are drawn to because of the wonderful outdoor amenities that are available not only within Reno but nearby in Lake Tahoe. We do project that our population growth will increase upwards of 25% between now and 2036. Given that, I'm very proud of all the amenities that the City of Reno is able to offer for our Parks and Recreation Department. So going back 30 years, since 1991, we have expanded our facilities. We currently have 88 parks, and since 1991, we grew by 27 parks. We've also increased our miles of trails. We are by almost 25 miles. We've taken on street landscaping, and we have added 2 recreation centers. And then we have expanded 7 parks. We just recently completed a significant expansion on Cyan Park in the south end of Reno. It is beautiful. I would definitely invite anybody to come check that out. With that, though, the challenge is we have grown tremendously to meet the needs of the community. However, given the recession that we had back in 2008, going through 2011-ish, our staffing levels have actually decreased, and that is a very significant challenge that we are facing. So you'll see that we used to have about 81 full-time equivalents, and we are now down to almost 76. So with that, this pandemic that we're all finding our way through, the use of parks and recreation has exploded. It's definitely been an amazing thing to watch people truly enjoy the outdoor space that the City of Reno is able to provide. But with that comes with additional maintenance needs. So we do have a service called Reno Direct, and just in 2020 alone, even though operations were slowing down due to the pandemic and the restrictions in place, we still received almost 2,000 parks-related service requests. Our team has done an amazing job trying to address that as much as possible, but as you can see, as a result of being understaffed, even though we do our best to address all of the issues that come in when we do our weekly park inspection grades, we are currently sitting at average at a C+. Looking over on the capital side of things, knowing that we have demand for growth and new facilities, we also need to take care of existing facilities. So as we planned out the infrastructure that we need to take care of over the next 10 years, we have about 126 planned projects, which come to a rough estimate of $189 million to be able to address. It's certainly a staggering number, and again, with the challenges financially citywide to include public works projects, annually we only have about $1.5 million to be able to address this. So our departments work very well together to prioritize projects that need to be addressed each fiscal year. So as Callie started the presentation at the beginning to talk about the desire to make Reno a base for outdoor activities, we've taken a look at the City of Reno overall, and this map essentially shows you the gray areas that we have service area gaps. So as we are able to provide quite a bit of service, we still have a long way to go in order to truly meet the needs of the community. Some of the feedback that we have received as far as where people would like to see the City of Reno add services, biggest one is that we do not have enough pools. So for a city our size, we only have 2 pools that operate year-round. The other two pools that we operate are seasonal because they are outdoor pools. There's definitely a demand for more flat field space. Outdoor sports are growing, and especially the sport of lacrosse. And so we are seeing a stress on the number of fields that are being needed for use, as well as those fields that are being used are being overused, just to try to accommodate all of the demand. Not enough dog parks. That is another common request that we get to expand and provide that amenity in our parks. And last but certainly not least, is not enough recreation centers. We are not able to grow into the far north valleys or the far south valleys to be able to provide that. This table, just a quick summary of what Reno is able to provide on a sort of a national level. This is the Trust for Public Lands survey, and so I won't go over every line, but the pools being sort of the largest amenity that we're looking to try to hit. Reno for per capita is at 1.5, and then if you look at Southern Nevada large cities, we're at 2.5. Just looking at Henderson, which is a gold medal Parks and Recreation agency, they are at 4.2. So what we are working on currently as part of the City of Reno Master Plan, there is a section in there that talks about ensuring that we update a master plan for Parks and Recreation. And so the last time we adopted a master plan of a sort was back in 2008. And as you'll recall, that was just around the start of the recession. And so much of that master plan was unable to be implemented because of the fact that we found ourselves in an economic crisis. So the good news on that, as I always try to find a silver lining, is that a majority of the work has been done and the need still exists. But what we want to do for this service plan is expand it. So first we will check to see, make sure that the current and planned park and rec facilities are included, look at where we need to grow. One thing off the top of my head that I know this plan does not include that needs to include, pickleball is a very fast growing sport, not only for the senior demographic, but it's starting to also catch on in popularity for the younger ages as well. We also want to take a look at the service levels, make sure that we are meeting those, and then to round that out, we need to take input financial information towards that. So that financial information will include how much it costs to actually build these facilities, and then on top of that, the maintenance and operations costs as well, so that we can be self-sustaining and sufficient as we plan to grow.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. And I think that what Jamie was just talking about is really important to kind of this bill as well, because the plan and the update of the plan, the involvement of the community to update that plan is going to be really important to identifying if these funds through this bill are ultimately approved by a voter, what does the community want and how much will it cost? And so that plan is a part of our tool to be able to really outline that and show that to the community. So what does Senate Bill 73 do? This bill authorizes the Reno City Council to establish a committee to recommend to voters on the 2022 general election the imposition of certain taxes to fund parks, recreation, open space, and natural resource needs. So this bill does not directly create revenue. It is a conversation about a process that we can have locally that ultimately would land with the voters for a decision. So how would this process work? Sections 1 and 2 really outline this process. So what would happen is if this bill were to move forward, the Reno City Council would establish a committee via resolution, and that committee is outlined in the bill. We'll get to that in just a second. That committee is formed with those members. Then the committee would have meetings to vet these needs and the potential revenue sources that are outlined in the bill. The committee would ultimately be authorized to recommend a potential tax solution, and that recommendation would move forward to the 2022 ballot for voter consideration. Details of the committee. So the bill specifically outlines committee members and membership of the committee, including how each member of the committee is appointed. The goal here was to reflect community involvement as well as representatives of industries from various groups involved in our community. Additionally, all members must be residents of the city of Reno. When we talk about the uses, the bill restricts uses to the following purpose. It says that the funds or any proceeds raised through this effort could be used for capital projects and ongoing operational costs for parks and recreational facilities. To Ms. Schroeder's point earlier in the presentation, maintenance is a very important need as we continue to build the space for outdoor activities. The proceeds could be used for the preservation of open space and the protection of the Truckee River and other natural resources. It is mentioned a few times throughout the bill, but most specifically in Section 4, that is where that component is. On the next slide, so Section 3 of the bill outlines which revenue sources may be considered as options by the committee. And you will see that several of them on this slide are struck out. Based on conversations with stakeholders, we have submitted an amendment, and there was an amendment that was submitted earlier this week, and we apologize, but we did submit a revised amendment earlier this morning with an additional change, so we appreciate the opportunity to present that today. But ultimately, those amendments had removed transient lodging tax, sales tax, and the reallocation of tax revenue that is currently imposed to fund the Flood Management Authority. So the committee, under the proposed amendment, would have the opportunity to consider supplemental government services, real property transfer tax, and property tax. There is one, so we talked about 1, 2, and 3 on this slide about changes to the various taxing options. But I also wanted to point out number 4 in the proposed amendment. This adds clarifying language that the imposition of a supplemental governmental services tax authorized by the voters would not impact the existing authority of Washoe County to impose their current authority. So we've added clarifying language on that. And then as we wrap up, we want to thank all the stakeholders who have talked with us about this bill. Both in support and those who we may hear from in opposition today. We've had some very good conversations about the need in our community for this and the value that these services provide. While we hear from many of them today, we know there were individuals and groups who couldn't participate today, but were able to submit comments to the committee. And so we thank you for making those a part of the record and considering those as well. The last piece that I wanted to point out, while the amendment today doesn't address these 2 things, but there's 2 things that we're continuously going to be working on. We've heard concerns that there's no language in this bill around accountability or a transparency, and we are open to amending this bill to make sure that we have transparency measures so our citizens know, one, how the funds were planned to be spent, as well as how they are spent if they are ultimately enacted. And we also know that there were 2 fiscal notes on this bill from the state level. The removal of the sales tax option should remove the fiscal note from the Department of Taxation. We've had a recent conversation with them about that. And as well as we are continuing to work with the DMV on their fiscal note to resolve those cost concerns. So with that, I would just like to turn it back to you, Madam Chair, for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions on SB 73? So is that a no? That's silence?
Madam Chair.
Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again, Ms. Schroeder. Getting to this space, I'm wondering if you considered using the Nevada Parks, Trails, and Open Space District Act that the legislature approved in 2017, allows the city to create a district. We have assessment fees as an option for funding districts that would support, from the way I read the bill, everything that you're trying to do here. So why are we here rather than using the tool that you already have in the tool?
Thanks, Senator, for that question. Yes, we have had conversations about the Parks District's option. And I think the Parks District option makes sense in some cases. When we're talking about particularly just creating a park district for just the city of Reno, for our kind of current existing base platform or our boundaries, one of the concerns that has been raised is the creating an additional level of government for something that we are already providing and the inefficiencies that may create. As well as we know that parks and recreational services are really intricate and connected to some of our other services that we provide in terms of planning for our community and how development comes in, as well as public safety and how all those services kind of work together. So one of the questions and conversations that we had is how do we ensure that those two things continue to work or those things continue to work seamlessly if it's operated and decisions are made by a separate entity. But with that said, we don't think that this bill necessarily precludes a park district option if that ends up making sense. The park district legislation also allows particularly to call out that a local government may contribute funds to fund the park district. And if this were ultimately approved by the voters, could be one of those revenue sources that funnels that way to fund it.
That's it, Senator Keycapper?
Yeah, I'll hear what other people have to say.
Okay, Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had some folks ask me about a couple of entities. One would be they haven't asked me recently, but I know the Reno Aquatics folks have been out there trying to build a pool for a while. There's also a group that's trying to improve Sky Cavern, and I believe they're both nonprofits. And in the one case, in Sky Cavern's case, I think there's like a 50-year lease for them, and the contemplation around a pool at Moana or other places in town has been around Reno Aquatics. So could any of these monies be used to help with operating costs for maybe a pool or for Sky Tavern when they've been leased out, facilities themselves perhaps have been leased out to a nonprofit organization?
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Jamie Schroeder, City of Reno. As this bill is proposed at the moment, it does not necessarily preclude us from being able to still put those funds that could come from this ballot initiative to those facilities because they are, even though they're leased out, they are still City of Reno property, and the leases really only occur with nonprofit organizations. So it's still allows us to provide service at affordable costs because one of the biggest things that we focus on in the world of parks and recreation is making sure that we have social equity so that people of all demographics are able to have access to activities that allow for health and wellness.
Thank you. And then I have one other question about open spaces and just want to get an idea from the City of Reno. What type of spaces are they looking at? Because if you're actually in the city, there's just not a lot of, there's just not that much land. So I'm not quite sure where those would potentially be purchased.
Yes, thank you for that question. Again, for the record, Jamie Schroeder. So as we are working through the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Service Plan, that is a component that we will need to update. So when we did the plan back in 2008, that plan included facilities that were desired by the community and potential locations that would be able to build those facilities. And so the landscape has definitely changed a lot since 2008. And so that's something that we definitely need to look at and look at placement based on the demand.
Thank you.
And Senator, if I may just add, Callie Wilsey for the record on that, in terms of our open space right now, the City of Reno does manage about 2,100 acres of open space existing. And so that would help us to maintain that and work on connectivity related to open space and trails in those.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, any additional questions?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Keycapper.
Thank you. Just in terms of the revenues that are available, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what was in the original legislation that became WC1, but I want to say it was 8 or so different options that were available to the committee to look at. This bill started at 6. We're already down to 3. You're not leaving yourself a lot of wiggle room here. I mean, you feel like you're giving enough options to the committee?
Callie Wilsey for the record. I think that each one of the revenue options that we've pulled off or have proposed to be pulled off have made sense in the sense of kind of what we're looking for in a funding mechanism that would allow us to be sustainable and stable to provide these services. So when we talked about, so when this bill was originally drafted after the final bill for the Washoe County School District's capital funding needs. The only one to my recollection that was new on our list was the reallocation of the tax revenue to fund the Flood Management Authority. I couldn't be mistaken, but I thought we had replicated the same ones, but I would happy to look at that. But when we removed the flood management portion, we had just done some research about the feasibility of that, and it just is not feasible related to bonding authority and whatnot. So I think your point is taken that the options are limited, but I think that there is still a good conversation to have, as well as the bill allows for a combination of the revenue sources to come together, not just one necessarily.
Okay. Members, any additional questions? So I had a question on the real estate transfer tax, which is, so you have real estate transfer tax, property tax, and supplemental GST. So for the real estate transfer tax, will this increase the cost of the house for a buyer if you were to add this on?
Madam Chair, so this would increase that tax when the transfer of a property is completed. It's difficult to say what the impact that would be until the committee would make a recommendation and vet that, whether it would be one of a viable tool, a revenue stream for something like this, as well as the rate. Since the bill does not specify any rates for any of these options, that would be the committee who would recommend those.
Right, and I know you did an amendment, and I know it was, this was a last minute. You've done a couple of amendments on SB 73, but I understand the role of the committee because I've seen the version of this bill, forms of this type of bill several times in my legislative history in this building, but I just think that it's super important going in to understand, I guess, the impact that a bill may have, because aren't the cost of homes in Reno like on the rise? I mean, are we pricing people out of the market now, where this then would cause a significant increase, and then people cannot purchase a home because it's just out of their ability?
Madam Chair, Callie Wilsey for the record. Again, I think it would go to the rate. I mean, if it was a small enough amount, then the impact to affordability may be limited. But similarly, if it was a small enough increase, it would likely not make that a viable option to provide value to support the parks and recreational goals here. So I think that it would be kind of dependent on how the impact to affordability would be dependent on the rate.
And just a quick follow-up, because I don't know if I saw this in the slide. So how much money do you need? There were a lot of goals listed in slides. How much money do you want to raise?
Madam Chair, Callie Wilsey for the record. So that is the part of the process that we are currently going through with our community to update the plan. So we had noted that there are the capital improvement plans, and those are, we have $189 million in capital improvements slated in our CIP. But what isn't captured yet is the maintenance needs around that. And what we, under the goals of that, updating that plan with community engagement, is to discuss with the community their expectations of our different facilities and what they want to see, so we can put a dollar amount to that to provide how much we're really looking at to meet those expectations of our citizens.
And so I guess why I'm asking this is because we never do anything without understanding, at least in theory, right, about what we're going after. And then we set the parameters for, I guess, the community engagement. So when you talk about 189 million in CIP projects in the queue, how much currently does the city of Reno have to pay for those projects in the queue?
Madam Chair, Jamie Schroeder for the record. So currently we have 1.5 million budgeted annually, and that is citywide. So we essentially have to compete against Public Works, police and fire, and other departments. We all list out our projects that we need to address, and then everyone comes together and prioritizes what needs to be done first. And then based on any remaining funds that are left, which are always pretty slim given that we only have 1.5 million each year, we try to see if there are some smaller projects that we can tackle. So 1.5 million.
So pretty much you guys have never had the money to do any of these. They're just in the queue. So for the maintenance costs, I know this is theory, but typically, as a city or even as a state, right, you have a maintenance schedule. You kind of know, all right, this is 10 years old, this is 15 years old. We know that the schedule is coming up, that we probably need to do the work. We need to change something. What do you have as a theory around the maintenance needs, an estimate that you're dealing with now?
So currently, when we take a look at our maintenance, so for example, in parks, just parks alone, we have a schedule that we do pretty much even down to the day. So we know that based on the number of parks that we operate, to do different categories of maintenance on those parks, we calculate the number of hours that it will take, and throughout all the different tasks that need to be done in the parks, we say, so for example, in totality, we know that that we should have almost 60 full-time equivalents to maintain our parks. But the budget really only allows for us to have currently 31 full-time employees managing our parks. And so what we have to do then, knowing that we don't have the funds to be able to do everything that we would like to do, is we just have to prioritize based on safety. And then we tackle things after, if there are remaining funds allowed, after we do some efficiencies. And if projects come in under budget, then we use any of those remaining funds to try to address some of the smaller things.
Okay. All right. So no theoretical dollar. All right. So, and I have a question about the slide because it was kind of super confusing. You had put out that, you've had an employee loss of FTEs, but you had 1991 and then you had 2021. That, first of all, that's a really long period of time to show a loss. And so I was trying to get the rationale or the logic behind showing that kind of over 20-year gap where you're trying to illustrate a loss. And I guess the first thing that popped in my mind when I saw that slide was, so what happened in that period of time? Because that could have been attrition, that could have been all kinds of different things, not necessarily a fiscal loss. And so I wanted you to, dig that out for me and tell me what was the loss of employees truly attributed to versus a fiscal, because you can't say it was recession based because it was 91. So can you talk to me about those numbers?
Sure. So again, for the record, Jamie Schroeder, Madam Chair, perhaps another way to be able to convey the situation that we find ourselves in, what we were trying to convey was back in 1991, we were meeting national standards at that point. And so when we take a look at ICMA, which is the standard that we strive to reach, the staffing levels in 91 were appropriate. Now, I know that it was a very large period of time, 30 years, but if we look at the staffing levels today, had we, with the growth that we do have now, that's where we realized that, essentially we should have grown in staff as well as grown with the amenities, and we have not. And so, if you just look at the fiscal amount, taking inflation into consideration, our budget essentially remained the same portion of the general fund over the course of the 30 years. So the trend line basically shows that currently Parks and Rec is about 5% of the general fund budget, and then it was 5% back in 1991 as well, even though our amenities have continued to grow. So the challenge that we're trying to convey to the community is that we have been able to grow our amenities as far as the parks because of the way our development code is written. We've been incredibly creative with when new developments come online and those PUD handbooks are being approved, being creative by working with the developer to have the HOAs maintain, do the maintenance, since we know we don't have enough people to be able to properly maintain parks, or have them, they'll build the park and then we can take over the park maintenance depending on the size of the park. So we've tried to be creative, but ultimately at the end of the day, where we sit as far as what we should be providing for maintenance and operations for our community is we essentially need another 31 full-time equivalents to meet those ICMA standards and achieve something higher than a C+.
Okay. And then my final question to you is, so in 30 years, there's been no investment in Parks and Recs, or because I'm like, as you were talking, I'm like going through all of the government affairs hearings that I've had in my life, 10 years of being in this building. And I'm thinking, okay, weren't there dollars that were set aside? Because there's been a tourism based, I guess, concept about outdoor, I would say outdoor based tourism. I believe I remember seeing it somewhere around 2015, 2017, where there had been a concerted effort for Reno or to start to focus on not just the casino, but engaging in trails, parks, doing other things. And there was more than one funding source, I thought, or there was a combination of maybe it was coming from the lodging tax that was also helping to seed that because of that kind of regional plan or regional relationship. So talk to me about what happened to that, right? So there was a tourist-based idea to enhance the economy, and then there was no funding to back it?
I'm going to step in here for a moment with your indulgence, Madam Chair. For the record, Dylan Shaver, Chief of Staff to the City of Reno, and then I'll kick to Ms. Schroeder and the able experts here at our disposal. You'd characterized at the beginning of your question that there had been no investment in Parks and Rec, and that's not the case at all, actually. The organization year over year has been able to provide great new amenities. The challenge that we're facing right now is one of upkeep more than anything, and not just upkeep with the growth in the community, but upkeep with the facilities themselves. So the characterization that we were somehow not investing in that is, to the extent, as you know, with the resources we have, we have been able to make new investments. And in fact, Ms. Schroeder had a new park come online recently, but there are almost as many parks as we have personnel to maintain them at this point. I'm sorry, more parks than we have personnel to maintain them at this point. And the challenge becomes, as this community looks to those next 30 years that you're talking about, how do we keep those in any condition that they remain usable for people? Because I think that the senators you have on your committee who live in this community can tell you that the upkeep for various reasons is becoming very challenging. And we have parks that the priority becomes, take out the trash and make sure that they're as clean as possible and move on to the next one. Well, over time, that park becomes a park that people will no longer take their families to. And that is not a Reno that we want to present to the world. And then it starts to actually go in the other direction and hurt our economic development. Jamie, you want to fill in the gaps that I left there?
Sure, yes, thank you. Again, for the record, Jamie Schroeder. So yes, thank you, Dylan, Mr. Shaver, that there has been investment into our parks simply because of the residential construction tax funding mechanism. So when new housing developments come online, that is the only mechanism in which we are able to build new parks. And then residential construction tax, of course, is limited really only to acquire land and build parks. We wouldn't be able to use any residential construction tax to do the maintenance for that. Plus, we would not be able to use it for any of our indoor facilities. So we can't use residential construction tax for any pools or rec centers, senior centers of that nature. Room tax is another funding mechanism that comes into Parks and Recreation based on the financial policy. The Parks and Recreation Department does receive a percentage of room tax. So, roughly, we get about $500,000, if I'm correct, in room tax. And then that really just gets transferred into the Parks and Recreation budget for park maintenance. So that's certainly a funding mechanism that helps, but it definitely fluctuates based on the economy. So in this situation with the latest impacts to the economy due to COVID, we had to look at potentially reducing our park maintenance budget because those room tax numbers came in lower. I'm not sure if I've gotten any clearer for you, Madam Chair. I hope so, but
no, you did. I was just trying to understand not just the COVID period, but the historical period of, I guess, the plans around it. But I'll leave it alone, and we will move. Members, do you have any additional questions? I will move to support.
I have additional question.
Senator Ratty.
Yeah, this has been something that's frustrated me, frankly, since I was on the city council for the sister city of the city of Sparks. And so I just think that this is worth diving into as well. So our current system for funding parks is really well designed to build parks. It is not so well designed to maintain parks or to refresh parks. And it's an equity issue for me. Because I think there's a piece of this we haven't really gotten into, but when through our development process and through our fees that are collected because of development, you can build that park, but because the development community, probably rightly so, has wanted to make sure that those dollars that come from that development go into parks that are closer to them and the residents that are going to live there. The city's segmented into districts. And so those fees can only be used in that district. So if you're an older district, if you live in the core of the city and there hasn't been any new development in your area for a significant amount of time, there's no replenishing of the development fees, that funding stream, to be able to do capital. And, I don't know how many of your kids have played on a metal structure over a cement like the ones that I grew up on, right? They don't have the money in those older districts to come in and refresh those parks with just the basic safety improvements that we've taken for granted, let alone the ongoing maintenance, which is removing dead branches from trees or replanting a grass in a park that gets a lot of love, or, you know, and. So there's an equity issue because those older, more urban areas tend to be in lower income neighborhoods. And the way the system is built, because it's built under this philosophy that the development should pay for the parks, if there's no development, then those parks have nothing. So for me, this issue is bigger than just the ongoing maintenance. It's also about the fact that there's no resources in any part of the community, you know, where there is already a lack of energy and investment. We just perpetuate that lack of energy and investment. And then in addition, the major funding source, and you knew I was going to say this at some point in this hearing, for cities to be able to do this ongoing kind of thing is property tax, which depreciates. And so then that just builds upon this problem of not having these ongoing dollars to maintain parks. So we keep building them and building them and building them. Newer neighborhoods get shiny new parks. Older neighborhoods have a really hard time getting their parks maintained or refreshed. It's great that we've figured it out and we've put it on the backs of HOAs so that they do it, but it really does just create a growing, significant haves and have-nots when it comes to maintaining our parks. And the $500,000 from roofs tax is great, but that barely pays for the impacts to some of our wonderful, wonderful parks that have become special events venues. So they're not so much used for parks and recreation, but they're used for entertainment that I love, Art Town and a million other things. But they get, I was just going to use some colorful language, I'll say beat to crap, and have required extra maintenance that I am certain that that $500,000 doesn't even come close to covering. So there's no question in there. It's a bit of a rant probably, and I apologize for that, but there's no money. There's no meaningful structure to generate revenue to maintain parks. And because of that, we have a significant challenge with growing inequity in our community where we have haves and have-nots when it comes to parks and recreation. And I think that that's terrible. So thank you for your discretion, Chair.
Well, no, number one, I appreciate that education and that history because it just made me think, yes, it sounds like there's a need for revenue and that there's some merit, but it seems like maybe there should also be a conversation about, you know, Reno restructuring how they fund what they do, right? Development piece of that. And then I wondered, how are redevelopment dollars flexed? Because typically the older urban areas are in the redevelopment area. So that tells me that your redevelopment area is also not driving any funds to recycle to be flexed.
Yeah, so that's, sorry to interrupt. It's an interesting concept. I think in Northern Nevada, we just have so many more neighborhoods that are older. Not every older neighborhood is in a redevelopment district. Downtown there's a few, but we have lots of neighborhoods. I live in a house that was built in 1948 in Sparks, but same concept, not in a redevelopment district. And the parks around it were built at the time, you know, the neighborhood was built.
Got it. I see. I understand. All right. Any additional questions from members? Okay, seeing none, we will open up for support for SB 73.
Take your place in the queue to speak in support of SB 73. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Madam Chair, this is where we have our council member online. Just whenever you're ready, I just wanted to let you know that she is available.
First.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This has really been a good discussion, and it really has highlighted a number of the issues that we face every day in the city of Reno. I'm Naomi Dewar, and I'm a Reno City Council member. I am one of the sponsors of this proposed bill and a very enthusiastic supporter. You heard a little earlier about our 2017 master plan. It took 3 years to put together. Over 7,000 people commented. the number one thing that they commented about, asked for, and supported was an increase in our outdoor spaces and our recreation opportunities. That's why they stay in Reno. That's why people move to Reno. You heard about our population doubling in 30 years, and you made very good comments about has not the revenue kept up? And no, it hasn't. And I just wanted to identify a few of those issues. After the recession, we shredded our parks department. So what what the charts show, they do not show that. We had more people. They were cut by 60%. We were never able to restore any of those people. What followed on that, of course, has been the pandemic. And to give you an example of this up and down, we cut during that time 368 temporary park employees. So they are temporary employees. They work about 9 months a year or 6 months a year, and they deal with things like supporting the pools and doing after-school enrichment, those kind of activities. So we've been able to replace some of those, but not all of them. So each time something like this happens, we end up with fewer people to address your questions. So our residents are expecting a great quality of life. We talked about why they moved there. You asked some great questions, and I just thought I would just take a few moments and address some of the questions from this perspective of the council. You mentioned pool shortage, and Senator Gansert asked about, recouping money from leased facilities. The challenge is we don't have a Moana pool. We once did. It has been gone for decades. It does have a geothermal resource under it. We would love to build it. Our staff have been incredibly enterprising in terms of, well, how do we get there? And we have reached out to the many charitable foundations in our community. And in this case, the Pennington Foundation stepped up with a $9 million grant. However, that grant is contingent upon matching funds, of which the city does not have. So I've been underway in terms of knocking on people's doors to see if I could raise some money to match that very generous grant. And I have been able to raise some money, but there is a very significant shortfall. If we go out to the people and the people support a ballot initiative, as they have indicated that they're interested in, they need to put their vote and their money where their mouth is. If they want to support this, we would in fact be able to build on that shortfall. We've talked about a park along the Truckee River. And Senator Keycaffer very appropriately talked about a potential park district. One of the challenges there is that there's not a lot of houses. There's some houses and there's some businesses, but some areas are just near open spaces. And to put the entire support of a linear district on just a few people, when almost everybody in Reno comes to enjoy that, seems inequitable. To Senator Rowdy's point about the inequities, I live in an area too, which is not having a great deal of development, but I have a park that was built in honor of actually a police officer in a very low-income area to refresh the park, which has concrete bench and concrete table. All the trees are missing. We've estimated $300,000. That $500,000 that might come from room tax, all of it we could get used up. In this case, we went to CDBG, which often maybe could be used for housing and those kind of issues. But instead, we said, let's apportion a portion of a CDBG grant to help refresh a low-income park. So what I want to say is Senator Gansert asked another very interesting question about open space. And I bring you back to the map that was shown. Most of the opportunities for open space are at the edges of the city of Reno boundaries. And there are opportunities within our sphere, which extends beyond the actual boundaries of the city of Reno, to work with other partners to look for open space. An example might be along the Virginia Range. Some of the area has been annexed into the city, but much of it is not. We could work with our partners, and we have planned to, for 6 years, to develop a Virginia Range open space corridor. That covers part of my area. I have about 90,000 residents in my district or ward. Many of them live in South Reno. Many of them go use those lands. We do not own those lands, and they are basically end up trespassing on other people's lands. So we think, let's put this to rights. Let's put an outdoor corridor together. I do support the amendment. I think some of the funding sources were probably included in error. Particularly the flood project, which needs its own money. The sales tax I would have never recommended. And so I think we look to the other kinds of revenue sources. And I just want to say throughout other states, it is often the property transfer tax. And it really doesn't affect people buying their first home because you're not paying a transfer tax until you already have a home and you're now upgrading maybe to a different home. That's when you're transferring to a different home. That's when that kind of funding opportunity would come into play. I also just wanted to mention another example, this RCT, residential construction tax, that we talk about. It is very limited in its uses. It may not be used for pools, as been pointed out. It may not be used for rec centers or senior centers. It may only be used to build new things in new parks. And often our needs are to fix that concrete bench that should be much more amenable, to fix the playground equipment, which cannot be replaced using RCT. So we are pretty much stuck in a hard place. You've asked great questions. I think our staff have done a good job of answering them. And I am here too to support it and to answer any questions that you have. I think that concludes my comments for the moment, but I ask you to give us this opportunity. I think I will close with that. Our people have said they want it. They come to Reno, they stay in Reno for the great outdoor opportunities. Those are shrinking as areas get developed if we do not establish some of these outdoor open spaces before the development sets in. And we are disappointing people that have been here for decades, who have said, Reno once was really a great place to live. Where's our park? And those kind of things. So with that, I'll just close. I thank your indulgence, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak and let you know how passionately we feel about this, how important we think it is to the quality of life for our residents and also to our future economic growth. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so BPS, we will go to the phone lines for support.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 523. Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Outdoor Business Coalition. We were the architects of AB 486 last legislative session that created the Division of Outdoor Rec, recognizing the incredible importance that people wanting to come here and play, but more importantly, the people that live here want to get out and play. And I think that this particular piece of legislation with the amendment gets to that particular place. I think it's important to note that during this pandemic, what we have seen, our residents and our visitors and others have discovered what wonderful things we have outside. And so the impact that that's having on our parks and on our urban trails and other places, I think can be deliberated by this committee when it's formed. And I think that the open, transparent way that this bill is constructed allows for a lot of input from stakeholders, from residents, allows a lot of input from all kinds of folks who want to see certain projects be built within the city of Reno. I'll finish off just by saying this, Madam Chair, that my most important client is my 13-year-old daughter. She's a competitive swimmer with the Reno Aquatic Club. There's currently 3 club teams using 1 swimming pool in the city of Reno to train. And it's not just the competitive swimmers that benefit from that. Our club, the Reno Aquatic Club, also helps teach young swimmers how to swim. And for a community that's surrounded by water, that's really important. So if this bill passes and if this committee is formed, you can bet that I'll be there advocating on behalf of that number 1 client, and hopefully we'll get some new pools built and some other very important recreational opportunities constructed in the city of Reno. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 377. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Madam Chair Neal and members of the committee, my name is Jana Moan. That's JAINAMOAN, and I am the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. I'm here today to testify in support of SB 73 with the amendment. Adequate public investment in conservation of our natural resources is critical for ensuring a healthy environment to benefit both people and nature. As we face the challenges of a changing climate, investment in parks and open space provide resiliency for our communities and places we can all enjoy. And investments in the health of the Truckee River, as referenced in the bill, will ensure that our communities have clean and safe drinking water for the communities that rely on that water. We commend the City of Reno for recognizing this need and for taking steps to make sound investments in parks, open space, recreation, and the protection of the beautiful Truckee River. SB 73 will help the City of Reno achieve those goals. Thank you for hearing my testimony, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Again, we are taking testimony in support of SB 73. If you would like to offer support for SB 73, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 155. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Once more, caller with the last 3 digits, 155. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI, CABRERA. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League. I'm also a lifelong resident of Reno and an outdoor enthusiast. Parks and outdoor spaces are essential to Nevadans' physical and mental health and overall quality of life. Parks and outdoor spaces have become a respite during our pandemic, with families returning to the outdoors for recreational opportunities and health benefits, affirming the connection between our land's health and our community's health. In a 2020 study by the Center of Western Priorities, they found that 79% of Nevadans support increasing funding for maintenance and infrastructure on public lands and parks to ensure public access, provide needed upkeep, and stimulate the economy in the West. SB 73 is an important step to ensuring our parks, trails, and open spaces are well-maintained, accessible, and meet the needs of our community while conserving and protecting Reno's precious natural resources. We urge your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 830. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Once more, caller with the last 3 digits, 830. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
We're here. Good afternoon. This is David Pritchett. I'm a commissioner for the Reno Recreation and Parks Commission appointed by the City Council a few years ago. So I'm calling to support this bill. The discussion so far has covered a lot of the issues very well. My neighborhood was subdivided 110 years ago. My neighborhood parks are indeed beat to crap, as my state senator said. And we've seen very well the staff present the fiscal history since the Great Recession. Maintenance and personnel in our Parks Department in Reno has never really recovered, and it's been a program of triage for maintenance and safety in our parks. As we heard, it's really important that a lot of the city enjoy an equity issue, because the construction tax, which we've heard about, is really the peripheral suburban parks in the city, where an influx of $1,000 per new residence is available for development. But the older parks and those newer ones for long-term maintenance do not have a solid funding stream. So this bill will help get us there, provide more rigidity, and learning about the changes of the funding options today with the amendment the staff mentioned. It looks pretty clear that, to me, a combination of property tax and real estate transfer would be the likely source of revenue. They've been successful in other places, and there's ways for the buyer and the seller to share that cost, and that would tremendously ease the entry cost of housing, which we heard from the committee a little earlier. So I ask the committee to support this bill, let the people of Reno work this out, and bring this to our own voters in November 2022, and will be greatly supported by the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that Director Jamie mentioned, because that's going to be the big promise to the public about what we need and what we'll do with this source of funding. Thank you very much. Again, I'm David Pritchett, a City Parks Commissioner.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Thank you, Chair. There are no other callers in support of SB 73 at this time.
Okay, so we will move to opposition for SB 73.
If you would like to speak in opposition to SB 73, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 872. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello?
You are live.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Nick Vanderpool, NICK-VANDERPOEL with Capital Partners, calling today on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. Today, the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce and our 2,100 members are opposing Senate Bill 73. We applaud the City of Reno for thinking outside the box, but the major concern we have with the bill as written is the funds will enter the general fund, and there's no accountability and transparency with audit conditions. There needs to be some safeguards put in place. The Reno Chamber Public Policy Committee shared some suggestions during our presentation that the city provided, which we appreciated, but as written, must oppose. Again, the Reno Sparks Chamber does appreciate the City of Reno taking the time to present the bill to the Public Policy Committee, but in the end, the Public Policy Committee agreed that this legislation is an inopportune time and are opposed to Senate Bill 11. Madam Chair and committee members, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 074. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Kevin Sigstad, K-E-V-I-N, last name S-I-G-S-T-A-D. I am the broker-owner of RE/MAX Premier Properties in Reno and a member of the Nevada Realtors. The Nevada Realtors oppose SB 73. SB 73 proposes to allow a committee similar to WC1 committee established a few years ago for the school district to look at certain taxes for the city of Reno, with 2 of them being property taxes and the real property transfer tax. In these current economic times, we have an affordability issue in our housing market. Lots of people are moving here from out of state, driving up home prices throughout Nevada. The average price for a home in Reno area has reached almost $500,000, due in part to buyers fleeing California. The realtors oppose any increase in the real property transfer tax. It significantly increases the cost of housing, especially for first-time home buyers, and acts like a sales tax on a home. Most new home buyers, first-time home buyers, do not buy new homes, and new homes account for about 4% of the sale of homes in any given period of time, most of which are priced out of the first-time home buyer price range. The tax must be paid at the time of closing and is bundled into the closing costs. They are not allowed to finance those closing costs, and therefore they have to be paid in cash at the time of closing. First-time home buyers have a difficult time coming up with cash to close a transaction, and an increase in the transfer tax would only exacerbate that problem. Passage of this bill would make that problem even worse. Any increase could potentially price a buyer out of a home, causing them to lose the property. For these reasons, the realtors oppose SB 73. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 112. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Bruce Parks for the record, BRUCEPARKS, Secretary for Battleborn Patriots. It is unfathomable to me that the city of Reno would even consider taxing the residents of the city of Reno again. The fiscal irresponsibility that's been demonstrated by the current city council and the city councils of the past, which has put the Parks and Recreation Department in this pickle, clearly demonstrates that until they demonstrate some fiscal responsibility, they should not be allowed to have any additional funding whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. Additionally, while I appreciate the position of the Director of Parks and Recreation, the fact of the matter is that our parks are not usable by the citizens, and it has nothing to do with the facilities themselves. It has everything to do with, again, the Reno City Council's irresponsibility in addressing the homeless problem. I challenge anybody on this committee right now to come with me down to Fisherman's Park in the city of Reno, one of many that I can take you to right now that are not conducive to the public enjoying our facilities. I've been in combat zones that are friendlier than those parks because of the homeless situation. City of Reno gets 86% of its water supply from that river. I challenge, again, anybody on this committee to walk that river with me. I can't use it to fish in because of the homeless situation. And even if I could, I would be hesitant because of the amount of pollution in it. I strongly, strongly encourage you to vote no on this bill. Thank you for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 700. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Brian Wachter, BRYANWACHTER. I serve as the Senior Vice President of the Retail Association of Nevada. Thank you, Chair Neal and members of the committee. In the interest of time, we would just like to say that we too are opposed to SB 73. We think these types of community committees should be used sparingly, and we certainly don't believe that they should be used primarily for ongoing expenditures for normal city operations. RAND does recognize that local government revenue needs to be examined, just like our Nevada revenue plan needs to be examined, and we need to make sure that our tax system can best capitalize on a post-COVID digital economy. RAND is supporting a future bill from Chair Neal that begins that process by modernizing and closing loopholes in our current sales tax code, which will result, we believe, in increased revenue to local governments through C-tax distributions, and we would strongly encourage those governments to take a look at those funds and utilize them for priorities such as that we find in SB 73. For those reasons, we do oppose the bill, and we urge you to do so too.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 124. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal. For the record, my name is Paul Moradkin, Moradkhan. I am the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. I'm here today to express the Vegas Chamber's opposition to Senate Bill 73 based on the fiscal policy that has been proposed. While the bill is specific to one jurisdiction, it is the opinion of the Vegas Chamber that is a policy shift from how we typically handle these funding issues and why we oppose the bill on with the accountability concern that you've heard today. We urge you to vote no on this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 105. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Lynn Chapman, State Vice President of Nevada Eagle Forum, LYNNCHAPMAN. I just wanted to say that this is a terrible idea, and it's a difficult time for people, and we're still talking raising taxes. Robert Heinlein, who is an author, said, quote, "There is no worse tyranny than to force a man to pay for what he does not want merely because you think it would be good for him," unquote. And I'm beginning to think that's what we're ending up with a lot today. Low-income property owners and retirees who are on fixed incomes really struggle to pay their property taxes. The property taxes keep going up because, of course, property is more expensive. So now we're being asked to pay higher property taxes so that people from other states can come and play and recreate in the areas around here, while our people won't be able to afford to go and enjoy the recreation areas. I was going to mention also about the parks along the river. I think it's interesting because I was sitting there thinking about Mill Park, which is not along the river, Paradise Park, which is not along the river, but Fisherman Park and Rock Park are along the river, and it's horrible. You cannot go there. You cannot take your families there. It's very dangerous. My husband would like to go fishing along the river, but there's no place to go that would be safe. They used to be beautiful places to go, and they are no longer. So now you want to take more money from the people to build more parks that the homeless, the drug users, and the partiers will be utilizing. I don't think that's a good idea, so please vote no on SB 73. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last three digits, 229. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal and committee. This is Jamie Rodriguez, Government Affairs for Washoe County. That's JamieRodriguez. I want to thank the bill sponsor and Callie from the city for working with us on our concerns. We are opposed to the bill as written. However, with the amendment proposed during this hearing, which we would understand removes the flood project funds as an option to be considered for the ballot question, as well as some of the clarification from the supplemental GST. It removes the impact to the county. The flood project was problematic for the county, as that is a regional tax collected by Washoe County to be used for public safety and flood projects, There are 2 projects that are bonded using that tax revenue, and that would have an inverse effect on the county and those bonds if any of those funds were diverted. So we do appreciate the city removing that. Also, in reference to the supplemental GST referenced in the bill, based on our conversations and the clarifying language, we understand it to not be the same as that was discussed in SB 11, or the tax which is currently under the authority of the county. But as we understand it, this rather creates a new supplemental GST that would be considered under this question. With those 2 funding options removed, it does also remove any direct impact from Washoe County. So if the amendment is adopted, the Washoe County's position would be changed to neutral. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you, caller. Next.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 116. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please begin.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alexis Motorex, ALEXIS with the Nevada Chapter AGC. We are opposed to SB 73. Again, we understand that local governments are not adequately funded, and it's because of that that the city has requested both of these bills this afternoon. But we are adamantly opposed to a supplemental GST being included as an option in this legislation. I don't want to repeat too much of what I said in my previous testimony, but I do want to reiterate that the original intent of the GST was to fund infrastructure. Should there ever be a need for the city to try and implement their own GST, it should be exclusively used to fund capital projects throughout the city and road infrastructure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 859 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Good afternoon. This is Janine Hansen, the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom. That's JANINEHANSEN. SB 73 will allow Reno to appoint a committee to consider raising taxes. Just imagine who will be on the committee. I could bet they will all favor raising taxes. Then the city must put it on their recommendations, the committee's recommendations, on the ballot for a tax increase. It was very difficult to hear on the phone just exactly what the amendment was. But I would go on to say that these possible tax increases, more on rental of motels and hotels when people are already suffering an economic disaster caused by COVID. We oppose higher car registration fees, more on transfer of real property. I was glad to hear, the one thing I did hear was that you were taking out sales tax, which is the very most regressive tax of all. And then additionally, you want more property taxes. My daughter and son-in-law looked for months to be able to find a home in Reno they could afford. They both have good jobs, but it was impossible for them to find anything that was available. This is becoming an increasing problem, and this bill will make it worse, and there will be fewer affordable homes. It is incredible to consider when landlords have not received their rent during the pandemic, businesses have been closed, and people have lost their jobs, that you're planning to raise taxes. This scheme to raise taxes needs to be rejected. We must give real consideration to those who cannot bear any more taxes. Right now, food prices are soaring faster than inflation and incomes. As the COVID-19 pandemic wreaks havoc on economic growth, concerns about hunger and malnutrition are rising. This was just in Bloomberg today, including it affects our state. We all love parks, especially if we can be safe when we use them. But if you can't feed your family or pay your rent, parks become a whole lot less important. Please reject SB 73. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. Next.
Chair, at this time, there are no more callers in opposition to the bill.
So is anyone signed in for neutral on SB 73?
If you would like to give neutral testimony for SB 73, please press *9 now to enter the queue. Once again, if you'd like to give neutral testimony for SB 73, please press *9 now. Chair, at this time, there are no callers in a neutral position either.
Thank you for that. So, City of Reno, any closing remarks on SB 73?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, we just thank you for the time today for us to share this issue with you. And we hope that we can continue to work on some of the questions that got brought up. But ultimately, we would love to have this opportunity to be able to have this conversation with our community and potentially put forward a solution to our voters. So thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will close the hearing on SB 73. Members, we did have a work session for SB 25. I am going to roll that to the next committee hearing on Tuesday. So we will go ahead and then move to public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Callers, if you'd like to give public comment, please press *9 now to enter your place in the queue. Once again, press *9 now to enter your place in the queue for public comment.
Okay. So there's no one raising their hand, right?
Chair, that is correct. There are no callers wishing to give public comment at this time.
Okay, so it has been an eventful, non-neutral day, and we will go ahead and adjourn Senate revenue. Have a good